It was a season when everything felt like it was moving too quickly for most people, yet for Barış and Elçin, time seemed to behave differently whenever they were in the same space. They did not notice it at first. In fact, neither of them believed that anything unusual was happening between them. Life was simply continuing as it always had, structured, busy, and filled with responsibilities that left little room for distraction. Barış arrived at the project with his usual calm focus. He was someone who preferred to observe before speaking, someone who believed that understanding came before expression. People around him often described him as steady, reliable, and quietly thoughtful. He did not try to stand out. Instead, he let his work speak for itself. Elçin, on the other hand, carried a different kind of energy. She was expressive in her work, attentive to detail, and deeply connected to the emotions of every role she took on. She had a natural ability to bring depth into even the simplest moments, and those who worked with her often noticed how seriously she treated every responsibility. Their first official meeting was brief and professional. A polite greeting, a few exchanged words, and then the focus quickly returned to the task at hand. There was nothing that suggested anything unusual would follow. And yet, sometimes the most meaningful connections begin in the most ordinary ways. As the days progressed, they found themselves sharing more time in the same environment. Long working hours became a routine part of their schedule. During those hours, conversations slowly began to form, not out of necessity but out of comfort. First, the conversations were simple. They talked about their routines, their thoughts on scenes, and their understanding of the work they were doing. There was a natural ease in communication, as if neither of them needed to carefully choose their words. They simply spoke and the other understood. Barış noticed how Elçin always took a moment before responding, as if she was not only listening to the words, but also understanding the meaning behind them. It was something he quietly respected. Elçin in turn noticed Barış's patience. He never rushed conversations. He allowed silence when needed, as if he understood that not every moment needed to be filled with speech. One afternoon, after a long day of work, they found themselves staying behind while others had already left. The environment had grown quiet, and the atmosphere felt lighter, almost peaceful. It was in that stillness that their conversation became more personal than before. Elçin asked a simple question, one that was not related to work. Do you think people change when they meet the right people in life? Barış considered the question carefully before responding. His voice was calm, steady. I think people don't change completely, he said, but they become more themselves when they are around the right people. Elçin looked at him for a moment, as if reflecting on his words. There was something about the simplicity of his answer that stayed with her longer than expected. That makes sense, she said quietly. After that moment, something subtle shifted between them. Not in an obvious way and not in a way that could be easily explained. It was more like awareness, a quiet recognition that their conversations carried a different kind of meaning now. In the following days, they began to notice small details about each other that they had previously overlooked. Barış noticed how Elçin had a habit of gently adjusting her thoughts before speaking, as if she wanted to be sure her words were thoughtful. Elçin noticed how Barış often listened more than he spoke, yet when he did speak, his words carried clarity and calmness. Despite these observations, neither of them rushed to define what was happening. There was no pressure to label their connection. Instead, there was a shared sense of comfort in allowing things to develop naturally. One evening, as the day slowly came to an end, they walked out together after finishing their responsibilities. The surroundings were calm, and the sky had begun to shift into soft shades of evening light. They walked without a specific destination, allowing the moment to guide them. There was a comfortable silence between them, the kind that did not feel empty. After a while, Elçin spoke softly. Some days feel heavier than others, she said. Barış nodded slightly. Yes, he replied. But even heavy days pass. That's what makes them bearable. Elçin smiled faintly at his response. You always find a way to make things sound simpler. I think things are simpler than we allow ourselves to believe, he said. They continued walking for a few more minutes without speaking. Yet the silence between them no longer felt like distance. Instead, it felt like understanding. As they parted ways that day, neither of them said anything significant. There were no promises, no declarations, and no expectations. Just a quiet goodbye. But sometimes what is not said carries more meaning than what is spoken. And somewhere within that silence, a beginning had quietly taken shape, soft, uncertain, but undeniably present. A beginning built not on urgency but on hope. And hope, once it finds its place in a heartbeat, rarely disappears easily.